All right, now that we're back here and ready to start importing our session and preparing for mastering, I can tab over to the arrangement view and I can do a couple quick setup moves. First of all, I can hit Command 4 to get off the grid so I have no editing grid anymore. And I can also go to the count in if I had one and get rid of that. That's going to be annoying when I'm mastering, as well as turning off the launch quantization. This is now just going to work like a stereo tape deck, and I can drag my track in and get it ready for mastering. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab my tune, my -6 dB pre-master, and I'm going to drop it in. And I'm going to make sure by looking here that I've got the -6 dB file, and I'm going to look across the headroom all the way across and see if there's any big loud peaks. Even this guy here is maybe a little questionable. If I really wanted to be super anal retentive, I could go into the mixdown and figure out what that one little drum hit was that was a little loud, or percussion sound. Maybe it's a field recording. But overall, before we master, it's always nice to see a nice even gain stage all the way across the whole track. Of course, there should be dynamics, but if you had like one big random peak sticking out any bigger than what you see here, you're going to want to probably go back into the mix and fix it. That'll, of course, get smoothed out in mastering, but the better the mix is, the less the mastering has to really evoke, and the better the final product will sound. So now that we've imported the track and we can see it on the channel, it makes sense to double click and to look and make sure, first of all, that it's not in warp mode. That's really, really important. And you are totally screwing this up if you have your track being warped at all. And then in addition to that, you want to put fades on the front end of the file. This is an oftentimes overlooked but critical stage of the mastering process. So let's go ahead and slide this over to the beginning of the song. And now I'm just going to say the first sound that I hear, I generally want to have around the first 16th note. The theory here is that after you hit play, you have like a split second to take your hand off the button before you hear the first sound. That's going to ensure that no auto fades or anything are fading in and taking away the punch from the first sound. Like, even let's just say, for instance, you did have a track that started just like boom, and you dropped it in like this. You wouldn't want to master it like that. You'd want to zoom in. You can see my 16th note here. There's my first 16th. I'd probably put this like right somewhere in here. And then I'd go in on this first hit and just make sure that that fade. See how it was even smoothing off that first hit? That's ghetto. You want that first hit to be fully there, but you don't want no fade, because that'll sound like a click potentially. So somewhere in there with just a little fade, about a 16th note in, it would sound like this. All right, so right when you pull your hand away, it hits play. Now in the case of our production, we were smart and we went ahead and gave it some silence in the beginning of the track. So now I can just say, all right, let's go over here, get this first hit to be somewhere a little before that first 16th note. That's a nice little amount of breath, maybe a little less. And then I am going to go ahead and put a little fade in here to make sure there's no click in the beginning. Let's try it out. So that sounds great and feels great. Now we're going to go to the very end of the track and do the same thing. Let's head over here, and here's where I really like to make sure I can see my meters, because we're going to be waiting for this sound to become completely silent. It looks like it's silent, but it's not. We're going to wait till that thing goes all the way out. Boop, right around there. That's great. And I can see where that line is. Just drag myself to right about there, and then I can go ahead and hit the fade. Let's try that. And imagine, like, how long do I want this to be playing before the next song starts? Around there. So I'm actually going to bring it in a little closer. We're just kind of finessing that outro fade. This is, again, overlooked but important technique of the mastering engineer. So we'll let that thing fade out. That's probably great. In fact, I feel like it's even still a little bit much. Nice. Just enough time for, the next track on Pandora to fade in or whatever. So that's a good setup. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that loop brace and I'm going to drag it over to the very beginning of the song, making sure to include any silence that I manually put there, and then bring this out to the very end of the track. Get a little closer in on here. Nice, just get that right to the end. And now we've got a nice setup where a track is imported. We can see the whole gain stage. Loop braces around the whole amount of time with fades. We're not in warp mode. And there's not any additional junk in the session either. Like even if you did have some return tracks, you could go ahead and delete all those guys. Any additional sessions, any additional stuff. Always, of course, making sure there's no default effects on the track. Volumes are all at 0 as well. So this is just deleted at 0, and we should be good to go to start processing this track and actually pumping it up and making it nice and loud. We'll be doing that in the next video.